Wow.
Hey. All right. Welcome everyone that is joining us right now. If you're in the lower part of the stage, I invite you guys to come forward and come join us in the main part of the Sunken Blimp Stage. If you guys are new to the stage, joining in right now, but if you guys are new, welcome to the Sunken Blimp Stage. This is the space where we host our weekly dive lives. And these are presentations where we're bringing a different speaker to talk about any sort of topic. It could be about their work, their life, their philosophy of living, whatever it is. We bring in the speakers and they have, between 20, 30 minutes to present whatever they want to. And in this past month, we've been in the topic of biophilia. And if you guys don't know what biophilia is, I know I'm going to leave it to Tim to dive that, even deeper. But it's a super cool topic so far. We've had some amazing presentations here. We've had Elizabeth Calabresi come on stage. We've had Sofia Perales. We had Bill Browning last week, and we took tours through different projects. We have a very, very special guest, and I would like to welcome everyone, Tim Beatley. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. I'm going to clap myself. I like to
Hey,
clap.
let's go. So, allow me to introduce Tim. For those that don't know, Timothy Beatley is a Teresa Heinz Professor of Sustainable Communities in the Department of Urban and Environmental Planning, School of Architecture at University of Virginia, where he has taught for the last 30 years. Beatley is an author and co-author of more than 15 books, including The Green Urbanism and Blue Biophilic Cities, Nature and Resilience Along the Urban Coast. Beatley directs the Biophilic Cities project at UVA and is also a co-founder of UVA Center for Design and Health within the School of Architecture. So honestly, Tim, such a pleasure having you on stage. I'm so excited for your
Thank you.
presentation.
It's great to
Yes.
be here. This is a really unusual venue, and I'm just delighted to experiment with it. I just saw somebody jumping up. Was that a UVA graduate? Was somebody was jumping? But that's great. So I'm going to quickly go through a few slides, and we do have some wonderful 3D models that are a little bit. There's one of a building, but they're a little bit more focused on the level of a city. So that's what's making my presentation a little bit different from some of the others. So at the core of what I'm interested in is how we can create cities that are deeply natureful, are places actually where we don't just have little bits of nature, but rather where we are immersed in nature. And it's really profoundly about a different kind of city. So we use the language of biophilic cities. We have a global network of cities. I'd love for everyone at some point to go and visit our website, biophiliccities.org. This is the definition. One definition, E.O. Wilson gets a lot of credit for his pioneering work around biophilia. It is this idea that we have co-evolved with the natural world, that we need and want that nature around us. It's not something optional. It's absolutely essential to leading a happy and healthy life. And for me, this is very intuitive. When I think about the things that give me delight and pleasure and meaning in life, the things on the screen, they're flowers and trees and birds. Of course, I'm going to talk a lot about birds and butterflies and water. All these things are profoundly biophilic. And you probably can't see this very well, but we could spend the whole time talking about the research and the evidence. It's really quite compelling and growing almost weekly. So this is an image that talks about a particular study that looked at the relationship between neighborhood design and the idea that neighborhoods with more nature, more trees, more birds, evidence lower levels of things like depression and anxiety and stress. So we know nature does so many remarkable things for us. A walk through a park, a walk through a forest, the end of that walk, we feel refreshed. We have evidence from the Japanese work around forest bathing that at the end of that walk, your stress hormone levels go down. You get a boost from your immune system. Nature is incredibly powerful. And a lot of that has to do with the shapes and forms of nature. And here's an image on the right that talks a little bit about fractals, these self-repeating shapes in nature. The fact that tree branch is a small version of the larger tree, the leaf is a small version of the branch, that we have evolved a visual system that effortlessly processes these natural shapes and forms. And so we're still trying to figure out exactly what it is about nature, but all of this evidence, all those things on the right slide portion of the slide are things where we have research and evidence that in the presence of nature, again, we see lower levels of depression. It improves our mood to have more nature. We're happier. We're more likely to be physically active and thus healthier. Even evidence that shows that the more nature we have around us, the more generous we're likely to be. So there's a strong argument to be made that we are better human beings when we have nature around us. And that word on the left, flourishing, for me, that captures a lot of what we want and what we want to experience in cities. It's delight, it's pleasure, but it's also deeper meaning and deeper connection between us and deeper connections to the natural environment that sustains us. So that's what biophilic cities are all about. A lot of attention being paid to the idea of resilience and nature-based approaches to adaptation to things like climate change. This is an image from Rotterdam. We know that trees, for example, the shading, the evapotranspiration will be really important for addressing urban heat and also for retaining stormwater and managing intense flooding. So we know that nature does so many things for us also. Well, the earlier presentations I know in this series, I've spent a lot of time talking about biophilic design and the design of buildings. And that's really important as well. Here is a wonderful, this is a cancer center that Ty Farrow and Ty Farrow Architects have designed in Toronto. You see the living nature, but also the wood in the form of a forest. I'm not quite sure why it's sort of advancing on its own there. A number of wonderful examples of maybe because I'm hovering on the screen, but a number of examples of buildings that are really wonderful in their bringing those natural features and natural elements into the design. Another example is a new building under construction in Toronto that incorporates hundreds of trees into the terraces of the structure and actually designed with floor plates that provide space for those living trees. So we want biophilic buildings. Here's a third example, a wonderful example from Pittsburgh of the Center for Sustainable Landscapes at the Phipps Conservatory. By the way, we have short films about a number of these projects on our biophiliccities.org page. You see the wonderful green roof. It's a public green roof. You see the windows that are open and operable. You see beautiful views. All those spaces have natural light. And you know, we want to design these kinds of healthy biophilic spaces. But we also understand that a natureful city, a biophilic city, it's a city full of biophilic buildings, but it's got to be more than that. It's got to think about all the spaces between buildings and beyond those buildings. It's got to be natureful at every scale and every space. So from room or rooftop to bioregion or region and all of the spaces in between, we want cities that immerse us in nature. We know that this is important for connecting us to each other and for connecting us to the natural environment. It's important for conservation of biodiversity. I am going to try to convince you that a biophilic city is a city that makes room for many other forms of life. It's a multi-species city, a biodiverse city, and part of that challenge is coexisting. And I believe we have an ethical obligation to coexist with many other forms of life, including birds. I'm going to talk about birds in just a minute. So Singapore has been an inspiration for us, and we've got a couple of 3D models that provide a little bit more insight into Singapore. Singapore is one of the cities in our Biophilic Cities network. It has done an awful lot to grow more nature. It's for many years been known as a garden city. In recent years, they have changed their name and or their motto and now calling themselves a city and a garden, and more recently still, calling themselves a city in nature. And sometimes they say biophilic city in nature, which may seem a little bit redundant. So they're doing many things to grow more nature in that city. And I'll go a little bit further. These are some summary. We'll circle back to Singapore, but here are some of the summary qualities or principles of a biophilic city. A city, again, that immerses us in nature, a city that integrates the built and natural environments. It's a whole of city approach, again, room and rooftop to region or bioregion. It's whole of life. So it's a city where you are exposed to nature from a very early age, and you have that natural contact throughout your life into adulthood and into elderhood, if you will. It's also a just and fair city where we have an equitable and socially just distribution of things like trees and birds and bird song. And it's also a culture of biophilia. It's not just the presence or absence of nature, but how engaged are the residents in that nature? How much are they caring for that nature? Are they engaged in actively restoring or stewarding over that nature? Are they able to identify common species of flora and fauna? So it's that engagement with the nature in cities that's important as well. Here's a slide showing a map network in Helsinki, Finland. So this idea you can move from a space in the very dense center of that city all the way to old growth forests at the edge of the city. Pittsburgh is in our network, and this is an image to illustrate that we want to look at that developed city in a new way. And we look and see these are some of the ways that Pittsburgh understands the nature of their biophilic city. Its connections to water, to the rivers, its forest canopy cover, which they're very proud about, 42%. But it's thinking about that bridge in a new way. That could be, and often is, a habitat for peregrine falcons or other species. So this vision is really about rethinking cities. So we have this network. More information about our cities. This is an image of handing the certificate or awarding the certificate to our newest member, which is the city of Raleigh, North Carolina. And we had a big event at Earth Day last spring. And so more information about what all of our cities are doing. This is just a little bit of a sampling. It's everything from sidewalk gardens to connections to rivers to greenway networks and super blocks in Barcelona, a green ring in Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain. So much interesting work and so many different ways that cities are incorporating nature and setting really ambitious targets. So these are images from a new comprehensive plan adopted for the city of I'm not sure why that went backwards, for Richmond, Virginia, aspiring to a tree canopy cover of 60% and minimum tree canopy cover for all neighborhoods in the city, with a special emphasis on underserved neighborhoods, African-American neighborhoods in that city that have had much less nature in the past. Or Arlington County in Virginia, another one of our partner cities, where you see this really wonderful idea of a green ribbon that is a forested walkways that allow you to move through the city with nature all around it. And many different things that cities are doing. Sometimes it's adopting codes. Sometimes it is about the pilot projects. It is about incorporating nature into plans. I'm going to back up because I think in this particular slideshow, I have skipped over Singapore. So I think with the help of my wonderful Sunken Blimp colleagues, let's bring in, if we could, maybe one of the buildings. Let's bring in and look at the 3D model of the Kempong Admiralty project, if we could. This is a WOHA design building. Can we find that one?
Yes, it's right here.
There it is, and we can turn it around and look at it. But under to implement the vision of this biophilic vision for Singapore, they've adopted something called the landscape replacement policy. It's part of a larger set of policies that goes by the acronym LUSH. And it's basically the idea that when you build a building, you have to at least replace the nature lost by the footprint of the building with nature integrated into the vertical spaces. So this is a wonderful WOHA designed structure, and at points, it's 11 stories tall, and at its highest point, the most dramatic feature is a series of forested terraces. You look down from above, it looks like you look like you're looking down on a rainforest, and so really quite remarkable. So you've got a rainforest on the top, you've got a beautiful public plaza on the ground level, which is integrated with the surrounding pedestrian pathways, and a really wonderful shaded public plaza in a tropical city where shade is really quite important. This is, by the way, a mixed use project that integrates lots of things. There's housing for seniors, there's a medical center, there's a food court, and all these things very close to a transit station. It is a wonderful project that illustrates what you can, how you can contribute to growing a larger biophilic city by designing projects like this, buildings like this, and the Singapore approach of having sky parks and rooftop trees and this rainforest on the top, and it's integrated. It connects with ground level forest, multiple layers of forest, and that connecting to ground level parks. So this notion of a seamless nature, living in a biophilic city that's immersed in nature. So that's a little bit of a look at a wonderful WOHA project. I'm going to keep going because I think I have other Singapore slides and a chance to, we're talking a little bit more about birds. So the second part of what I wanted to talk about is just a little bit more about birds, and the idea that a biophilic city is a bird-friendly city. I don't think I can play the recordings here, but these are on this slide a couple of wonderful bird song, including a wood thrush, which is one of my favorite bird songs. And birds animate cities, right? They are just phenomenal creatures. Yet we know, studied 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, that in the U.S. We have lost a third of our birds since 1970. And about 50%, if you think globally, about 50% of bird species globally are in decline. This is from the latest bird life state of the world's birds report. So we have a lot of challenges. A lot of them have to do with climate change and deforestation and habitat loss and overuse of pesticides. But a lot of it are things that we can address through the design of buildings. And I've been thinking and writing a lot about this idea of a bird-friendly city. I won't have time to talk about all of these things, but there are really important ways in which we can take action. So one thing we know is that upwards of 1 billion birds a year are killed by striking windows in buildings in the U.S. alone, and that represents a possibility for us to undertake some changes, and that includes incorporating new forms of glass, new glass and facade treatments. This is the Jacob Jen in New York, which is a wonderful example where they've retrofitted all of their glass, and they've replaced the glass with a fritted glass. This is a baked-in ceramic pattern that birds can see. And as a result of this, they have seen more than a 90% reduction in bird mortality. And by the way, making this building bird-friendly also resulted in a 26% reduction in energy consumption. So we can make our buildings and cities bird-friendly, and yet also make them less carbon, emitting lesser amounts of carbon and consuming less energy. So we have a lot of examples of bird-friendly retrofits, like the Frick Center in Pittsburgh, here are very low-cost paracords or parachute cords that drape on the exterior of the glass to make that facade visible to a bird. And buildings like the Candida building in Atlanta, the Georgia Tech campus, you see the fritted pattern on the right. And even retrofits like the Interface Carpet headquarters building in Atlanta, where they've installed a beautiful polyester sheathing around the building that's a feature of a forest, but it also allows birds to see that building as well. There are many things that we can do. Many of them result in cities and buildings that are really more interesting architecturally. We know that urban light is a major problem as well, and so there are many cities that are now trying to get companies and building owners to turn off lights. So we have cities like Philadelphia, where they're the latest addition to cities doing voluntary lights out initiatives. So I'm getting to a couple of the other models that our wonderful Sunken Blimp colleagues have put together. And so I want to make the point that we want to design cities with other species in mind, and a bird-friendly city is one where we're going to look at that city through the lens, through the eyes of a bird. One of the cities that has done that is the city of Edmonton, Canada, also in our Biophilic Cities network. And they have been using circuit theory, circuitscape modeling to sort of understand what the city looks like from the perspective of a bird. And so this idea that you can identify points, breakages, points of disconnect, maybe where the tree canopy ends and where a bird would have to fly across a road. So here we see this is a stretch of, I think, the North Saskatchewan River. So the city of Edmonton is well known for emphasis on ecological connectivity, becomes the kind of ecological spine, and then the tree canopy and the habitat, all these other ecological elements of the city become really important. You can't see the map on the slide very, very well, but this is a city where if you can just sort of imagine what it would look like to a bird. So the bird is flying through this city, and where there are places where there are tall buildings, or even not so tall buildings that have glass facades, those represent dangers, of course. We want to imagine how migrating birds could move through this city with the least amount of damage or danger, rather. And so Edmonton has done the really interesting thing of building wildlife passages for many different species of animals. So from very small to very big. Let's go back to that image. And here you see on the screen actually a fairly recent example of a wildlife passage. I think there are now more than 35 of them in the city. So again, the idea that if you are a coyote or a smaller mammal, it would be possible to move through the city without, for example, being killed by a car. It turns out that one of the benefits is that the car-wildlife collisions goes down dramatically. Well, we have a lot of evidence, in fact, of the ways in which wildlife passages work. And here's one really big one in Los Angeles. You've probably heard about this wildlife passage, primarily motivated by a concern about mountain lions. And we have a remarkable story of mountain lions in Los Angeles, living in the Santa Monica Mountains, but moving around through the city. And cars and highways are one of the biggest threats. So this wildlife passage, though, like the wildlife passages in Edmonton, will actually also be helpful for birds, as that you can't see that very well, but that's a screenshot of an Audubon story, kind of presenting the results, presenting the evidence about how wildlife passages are actually good for birds. as well. So cities like Los Angeles, and we're hoping that Los Angeles is joining our network very soon. We're very excited about that. They have proposed a new wildlife ordinance that's going to allow for the buffers, vegetative buffers between homes, and wildlife-friendly fencing, and new measures to protect trees. Will make it safer and more possible for a species like that mountain lion to move through the city. So all about coexistence, and I've clearly, obviously, moved a little bit beyond birds, but I do want to just quickly go through and get to our third model. I think that's the third one, which goes back to Singapore. So Singapore has really done some wonderful things to make room for other species, including some wonderful conservation success stories around birds. But one of the most dramatic things has been the return of these smooth-coated otters. They've now become sort of international celebrities. You see some of them on the right there. Now more than 80 of them that inhabit the city, in I think 12 different families maybe. Why is it they came back to the city? Well, part of the reason relates to the model that you see on the left and the image on the screen to the left, which is a wonderful story of the regeneration of a river, the Kallang River, that you see here. And it's a story of taking a river that was essentially a hardscape flood channel. Here you see it on the left, and converting it back to a meandering a river that has a lot of habitat and supports a lot of species of birds and butterflies and dragonflies and all kinds of biodiversity. And if you can look at it on the left, you've got trees, you've got all of this wide open spaces flanked by lots of high-rise buildings and lots of people. This nature now has resulted in this park being the most popular space in Singapore. So many people come to this park for these qualities, and there are stepping stones, and there are ways for kids to get down to the water. There are footbridges, and one of the benefits of doing this is that this is flood. It's a form of ecological infrastructure. So it's designed to fill up with floodwater and to retain and store that floodwater and reduce the impact of flooding, which you see here in this image. So it's been a big part of the story, though, for why the otters have returned to Singapore. So a biophilic city is a regenerative city, a restorative city, a city that makes room for all of these different forms of life, from birds to otters, and it all goes together. We want to coexist. We also need to restore and regenerate that landscape that will support all of us, but especially species like. Here's an image of Lena Chan, my colleague. You have to give her a lot of credit for helping to advance the agenda of biophilic conservation and restoration in Singapore and beyond Singapore. Singapore has pioneered this metric, this evaluative framework called the Singapore Index of Biodiversity, and a number of cities are using it, including Los Angeles, by the way. So I'm getting to the end here. Cities that are doing similar things around the world. Medellin, Colombia is famous now for creating its 30 green corridors. You see a map of them on the left, planting trees and nature in these linear corridors that bring birds back to the center of the city. Trees, wonderful stories of tree conservation and expanding tree canopy. We know that especially conserving, protecting large trees are going to be very important. They're very important for birds. We know that there are these amazing these synergies between species like blue jays on the left and oak trees. Those oak trees provide so much food for the birds, but also the birds help to propagate, help to plant new oak trees, and many cities that have some form of tree conservation or tree. For example, Washington D.C. has a wonderful tree canopy protection act that you see here for trees over 100 inches in circumference. These are considered heritage trees and are supposed to be protected unless they represent a public danger or they're dead. I'm going to go quickly here and go to the end. These are a few more slides than I worked out. We have this idea of wildness in the city, and I need to stop. We had at the last minute to go back to an earlier slide deck, and I had a few more slides here, but in about 5 minutes, I'll kind of quickly go through them. This is Perth, Western Australia. A big part of the agenda of a biophilic city is rewilding those spaces in the city. The Bishan example in Singapore is a good example. This is an example in Perth of a sterile water feature that has been converted into a wonderful native biodiverse wetland. Another example would be in Estes, another of our partner cities in Spain, where they have daylit a stream, a small river that was in a pipe underground. They brought it back to the surface and made it a sort of central feature. Lots of stories of how we restore the landscape, the native plants of a city. Cura de Bot in Costa Rica has this wonderful sweet city strategy of planting pollinator gardens and pollinator plants and bio corridors that move through the city. Wonderful story there. I'm going to go quickly through this. Even our yards around our houses could be converted from sterile turf grass to bird-friendly, biodiverse yards and gardens. This is our friend Nina Marie Lister, who's led the campaign in Toronto to move beyond making it a violation to plant the native garden to giving homeowners the right, in fact, to plant that native garden. It's also about changing our practices when it comes to lights and shifting to dark sky lighting that shines down and not out. And cities like Pittsburgh have now made that mandatory throughout the city. So the thing about how habitat can be created in cities and listing nature like beavers, wonderful stories. I'm gonna just quickly flip through the rest of the slides, and I'm getting towards the end. And if you see anything that looks interesting, I'm happy to go back and talk about it. A few more slides about how we integrate bird-friendly design into urban environments. Every building should incorporate bird habitat. And here's my last slide, which is to say that in a biophilic city, we need to rethink the metrics. We need to kind of rethink what makes a good city. So circling back to thinking about bird-friendly cities, I'm frequently saying a good city is one where everyone in that city, whatever neighborhood you live in, can fight it. And I think that's a really important metric. I'm going to stop with this slide, and hoping let's see, I want to ask my Sunken Blimp colleagues, we've covered all of the wonderful 3D models, right? There's nothing we've left out. Maybe
there's actually the waves. That's the only one.
Gosh, we forgot one.
Which is the cover. It's the cover of our presentation.
So I'm realizing that the slideshow that we couldn't get to work at the last minute was a little bit more logic to flow. So one of the things about a biophilic city is that, again, this idea of immersive nature, and it's how we move through a city too, right? It's the trails and pathways and movement corridors, and we want during the normal course of our day to move through nature. And so Singapore has done this through a number of means, but they have a network of pathways. They call them the Park Connectors Network. And this is about a 10 or 12 kilometer segment of a larger 350 kilometer wide network in the city. And so this particular stretch is one where you move through a tree canopy cover. So you actually are on this sort of elevated metal structure that takes you through trees. And talk about immersive nature. It's really wonderful. And one part of it, I don't know if we have the Henderson Waves Bridge in this model or not. I'm thinking maybe we don't. But this is a bridge, a pedestrian bridge over a road, and it is a biophilic form. It's a Henderson Wave. It's a very kind of wavy biophilic bridge, but it's also it's a public space because people are not just walking across a bridge; they're going up to this space to have a picnic, to watch the city, to see to get a larger perspective on the nature of that place. So this is one of my favorite stretches of this larger park connectors network. So thank you for showing that. And I think that's probably it. And again, I will say thank you for bearing with me as I flipped through a lot of slides that I had I had taken out of in the presentation I was hoping to show. We couldn't get it to work at the last minute. So I'll stop there. And I'll clap for you all for being really patient as I went through all that. Do we still have some time for some comments or questions or conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I would like to invite everyone now to the floor. If you guys have any questions for Tim, feel free to ask. The floor is completely open.
So they can just unmute themselves and ask me a question. Right?
Yes, I think everyone's trying at once, but
I've stunned everybody into silence.
In the meantime, I actually have one question, and
Okay.
I think was someone saying something?
Yeah. I have a question.
Oh yes, of course. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love the this.
I think your audio is a little bit low. Can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Yeah. Do you
Perfect.
listen to me now? Okay.
Yes.
I really loved this presentation since, this symbiosis between the nature and our cities is amazing. It's really wonderful. And I think I've read a little bit about Singapore before. And, they are a smart city, actually, and I think that's a good point toward the biophilia infrastructures, since it gives an approach to use very in a wise manner the data that we collect from Singapore is very sophisticated and has a lot of data. So I wanted to ask, like, how we manage to precisely use this data to preserve some species, some animal species, and some plants. It's an interesting topic.
Yeah. It's a great question. And we advocate using technology and the smart cities vision could help us certainly to grow a more biophilic city and to protect the nature, expand the nature there. And it can happen in many ways. The more we censor cities, so we already have several cities in our network that are using moisture sensors, to know the condition, to monitor the condition of green rooftops, for example. We have a huge challenge with drought and heat. We have a huge challenge keeping all those trees alive in cities, right? And so if we can use that sensoring technology, that digital technology to better monitor the health of those trees, we can water them when we need to. We can protect them. We can more successfully grow them. Similarly, whether it's a a camera trap that follows coyotes, or whether it's a smart nesting box for birds, for species that may be threatened or struggling in cities. All of this data, all that information could be very useful in doing things that will help protect those species and make room for them and reduce the conflicts between humans and the other forms of life we co-occupy cities with. So I think there's a lot of potential, and I have a colleague, Nadina Gali, who's kind of pioneered this idea of the Internet of Nature, so that whether it's sensors or drones or so many smart technologies that could be used to better connect us to the nature, to better protect the nature that's there. Again, all the things we need to keep trees healthy and birds alive. I have a colleague who's developing. Yeah, let's clap for that. I have a colleague who's developing a sensor for windows. So we don't really have a good way of understanding when there's a bird strike of a window, and knowing which facades have more strikes, and I can imagining the smart technologies that would help us to prevent bird building collisions, or collisions with wind turbines or cell phone towers or things like that. So so smart cities is a compatible vision with biophilic cities.
Wonderful. I have another question, one a little bit more personal. When you get into this world, like making a bridge between nature and technology, it's very exciting. So what would you say that would be the part you most liked about it?
The part I most like about it, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm very practical, and I want to, ultimately at the end of the day, I want to advance real nature in the sense of living nature and biodiversity, and I want to create conditions that I want to live in a city where I see and experience that nature, and I feel connected to it, and so that's what would excite me about smart technologies. So there's this new company, I think it's relatively new, that produces these bird boxes. They're haiku boxes that monitor you in the outside of things, and they're listening all the time to bird song, and they will deliver in real time a list of the birds they're hearing, and it will go it'll go to your computer or your iPhone. And so what excites me about that, I don't want to replace the experience of seeing a bird or hearing a real bird in real time, but if that notice on my iPhone or my computer helps me to understand that there are species of birds just outside my door that I really want to go and see and experience and watch, that's great. And it's not a substitute. It's a technology that's helping. It's nudging. It's facilitating. It's further helping to connect people to birds and nature in cities. So I think those are the kinds of technologies that I would be especially enthusiastic about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lewis, for the question. And beautiful response. And actually, this made me think of something as well. This idea of smart city and sensors on windows detecting collision. I was recently in Universal Studios in Florida, right, in the Harry Potter park. And I know this is like a big shift of topic, but it made me think that if you guys haven't been to the Harry Potter park, there's a huge dragon, right, that spits fire every now and then. And then at some point, I remember just asking one of the staff, like, "Oh, is it timed? Is there a schedule when the dragon spits fire?" And she said that the dragon, shoots fire whenever he wants, but it just does not shoot fire when it detects birds. So
Oh,
whenever there are cameras around that are, have artificial intelligence neural network to detect bird movement, whenever they detect birds in the area, they don't shoot fire. And my first reaction was like, "Oh, that's really nice." However, she said that, yeah, they're just trying to avoid a lawsuit.
oh yeah.
Because if
Okay.
a little kid experiencing this magical world suddenly sees a pigeon flying through fire and, frying in front of their eyes, that's a big lawsuit for Universal. And this
Okay.
made me think of a question to you, is that a lot of these big decisions in terms of regulations and all that, they usually follow money, right? I know this is kind of like a perhaps controversial or different opinions on the topic, but if something has some sort of an approval from the government, or you have tax exemptions for being sustainable, all of that, usually big corporations lean toward that, or
Yeah.
the social impact, all of that. Usually, if you want to be realistic about the whole world, it follows money. So my question to
Mm.
you would be, do you think moving forward, adapting more and more solutions like that, does that require more regulations from the government or
Mm.
more awareness for people to actually choose that path?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a combination of those things. I do believe we're in a time when we need to move from pilot projects and little things that we do. We've got to scale up, right? So one of the impressive things that is happening is that cities like New York City adopting mandatory bird safe design standards, mandatory bird safe glass. The first 75 feet from ground level up has for new buildings or substantially renovated buildings have to be bird friendly. Yes, that'll add a little bit of cost to that building, but it's a regulation. It's basically society saying these are the rules from now on. We're thinking about birds, and birds. You have to think about the safety of birds when you don't have the right to build a building that causes the death of many migrating birds through the city. So, but that bill, or that local law 15, it was called, that was adopted by the New York City Council in 2021. That was, of course, a result of a lot of individual people concerned about birds, and organizations like Audubon, New York City Audubon chapter, and others. So it takes personal action. It takes political action. We to get a regulation passed certainly requires some activism, right, and some political engagement. But when you were talking about money, I actually thought you were going to ask a slightly different question, which was are there ways of incentivizing many of the biophilic city ideas I've talked about? And we do have a long history of cities, for example, around green roofs, Washington, D.C., a number of cities that offer financial assistance or financial incentives for the installation of green rooftops or green walls, other kinds of biophilic, urban biophilic elements. So I think there is a legitimate value or a legitimate purpose to for legitimate use for financial incentive, financial subsidies. So money shouldn't be the driving factor, but it can be a useful instrument in reaching the biophilic city.
For sure. Awesome. Thank you so much. And does anyone have any final questions before we end the evening? All right. Well, if people don't have any other questions, I'll just like to say that thank you so much, Tim, for the beautiful presentation. This was absolutely astonishing seeing
Well, thank you for having
seeing
me.
you
It's
present.
fun. As you know, I just changed my avatar, so I'm getting used to looking at myself, and I've got this sort of high Elvis, collar, right? That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
So I
it's a
have a
good
whole new
look. It's a
life.
good look.
Yeah, cool look. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me.
So, of course, and thank you for being here. And thank you everyone that attended the lecture and the amazing question. Louis, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really happy to see people here on the Sunken Blimp stage, people that are seeking knowledge or people that just stumble upon, a lecture like this and stay until the end. I really appreciate you guys too. And before we go, I actually would like to record everyone. If you guys can come to the center of the stage, you can click here on this rug. I would like to record everyone at the same time putting the heart on the space, which is on the top right corner. So don't click it yet. And if you have click it already, click it so you undo it. And then when I count to 3, we're all gonna shoot some hearts into the space together. Okay? All right, so I'm gonna count to 3. So 3, 2, 1, shoot. Hey. Nice. All right. So thank you very much, everyone. Now the evening's officially over. But if you guys want to stick around and talk on the stage, I'm going to be here for a few minutes. But so thank you very much, Tim. And I hope to catch you later, perhaps a future dive live, whenever we're talking about how birds took over the world.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.
Session.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being
Thank you,
here.
guys.
Really appreciate y'all. I love your hair, Nick. Love the pink hair.
Thank you.
How did you find us? How did you come across Sunken Blimp Stage?
Oh, it's my first experience here. Just doing some